Who would you call if you knew you had only months left? For Helen, the only answer had 4 legs and a wagging tail. What happened next changed her fate, and she never saw it coming. Helen spent most of her mornings rearranging the little bottles on her kitchen counter. They made a kind of rainbow: red, yellow, blue, and her doctor said she'd need them all if she wanted to keep going. The irony didn't escape her. A rainbow that meant the sky was falling, not clearing. She used to laugh at those who feared death, but laughter was a luxury now, and luxuries were for the healthy. Her daughter Lisa called once a week. Scripted concern, careful questions. Are you eating? You sound tired. Do you want me to come over? Lisa always sounded tired herself, or maybe just bored. Helen learned to read between lines long ago. But Daisy never got bored. The old golden retriever had more patience than a saint and more stubbornness than Helen's ex-husband. Daisy lay beside the bed, always on alert. Every time Helen coughed, Daisy's ears shot up as if she could fix it with pure willpower. Helen joked that Daisy was the only soul in the house with a plan. Helen's days blurred together. Pills, fatigue, the slow fading of who she used to be. She scrolled through photos of her past life. A wedding cake, her late husband's grin, a daughter's school play. A dog, always in the corner of every frame. One morning, Helen decided to water her dying succulents. Some perverse comedy intending to something more resilient than herself. She barely managed to drag herself to the sink before her knees buckled. She collapsed, pain radiating, breath ragged. The world spun. She reached out, but the counter was too far. Daisy barked, sharp and furious, and nosed Helen's trembling hand. The phone was on the table. Helen tried to crawl. Daisy tugged at her sleeve, desperate, whimpering. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Fear, frustration, humiliation. But Daisy didn't leave. Instead, the dog did something Helen had never seen. She pressed her whole weight against Helen, bracing her. With effort, Helen used Daisy as a crutch. Somehow she made it to the phone, hit redial, heard Lisa's voice. Lisa's panic came fast. First time Helen had heard true urgency from her in years. Stay on the line, Mom. I'm coming. Don't move. As if Helen had a choice. Paramedics arrived. Lisa hovered. Daisy wouldn't move from Helen's side. Your dog's a hero. The paramedic grinned, trying to lighten the mood. Helen felt her pride and her shame both burning. When the house was empty again, Lisa gone, Daisy back at her post, Helen whispered, "You saved me. Stupid dog." Daisy licked her hand. But what Helen didn't know, this was only the beginning. What happened next would rewrite the rules of hope and loyalty. You won't want to miss what comes after this night. When even family walked away, one creature refused to budge. But Helen's next discovery would tear open old wounds and force her to confront the truth about being truly alone. The next morning, Helen woke to sunlight on her face and Daisy pressed so close she could feel every breath. It felt like waking in a bunker after the war. Lisa had left a sticky note on the fridge. "Call me if you need anything. Love you." 3 words as light as air, fluttering in the draft. Helen poured herself a coffee, bitter as regret, and scrolled through her phone. 0 new messages. Facebook offered memories. Lisa's wedding, Helen's own 60th birthday, Daisy as a puppy chewing through the living room couch. If Helen disappeared tomorrow, who would notice? The silence that followed was always answered by Daisy's wagging tail. That day the first bill came, pink envelope, urgent. Medical. Helen's breath caught in her throat. She remembered her late husband's warnings about saving for a rainy day. Who knew it would pour this long? She dialed Lisa, but the call went to voicemail. A second later, a text. "At work." "Later, Mom." Helen laughed, but it came out cracked. "Somebody's gotta pay for the dog food, huh, Daisy?" Daisy looked up, unamused. Later, at the oncology office, Helen waited 2 hours past her appointment. The nurse barely looked at her, eyes glued to a tablet. Helen's chart might as well have been wallpaper. On the way home, Helen saw a mother and child at the bus stop. The girl dropped her ice cream. The mother scolded her, then relented and bought another. Helen remembered the days when she was someone's whole world. Now she was barely an errand. That night, Daisy whined until Helen took her outside. In the yard under the porch light, Daisy froze. Then she barked. A strange guttural sound Helen had never heard before. It was only when she looked closer that she saw it. A neighbor's dog, thin and shivering on the street. Helen hesitated, but Daisy nudged her forward. Together, they brought the stray into the house. Helen called animal control, left a note for the neighbor, gave the dog some water. As she sat between two dogs, her old friend and the lost stranger, Helen realized Daisy had never given up on her, not even for a second. But had Helen already given up on herself? This new visitor brought more than fur and fleas. It brought a question Helen couldn't ignore. Tomorrow everything would change again, and Daisy would make sure of it. You'll want to see what Helen does next. When you hit bottom, sometimes the one who pulls you up doesn't speak your language or any language at all. Helen thought she was rescuing a dog. Instead, she found herself face to face with her own forgotten courage. Helen had always been a planner, but illness had made her world small. Daisy and the stray, whom Helen called Lucky for lack of a better idea, became her entire universe. She posted about the found dog, waited for a reply, and tried to ignore the gnawing fear every time the phone rang with another bill collector. Days passed and the neighbor finally came for Lucky, all smiles and tears. "Thank you so much, Helen. I don't know what I'd do without him." Helen smiled, but inside she felt hollow. Who would miss her if she disappeared? Even Lisa only called now because she had to. That evening, Helen found herself staring at the mirror, tracing the lines on her face. She was tired of waiting. Waiting for good news, waiting for the end, waiting for her daughter to remember who she was before all this. Daisy lay beside her, loyal and unwavering. In a moment of reckless hope, Helen dug out her old paints and canvas. Daisy watched with interest. The brush felt heavy, but her hand remembered. She painted Daisy first, ears up, eyes wise. Then she painted herself, thin and gray, but with Daisy's paw on her knee. When Lisa came that weekend, Helen showed her the painting. Lisa's reaction was immediate, raw. "Mom, I had no idea you were still you." Helen shrugged, sarcasm thick. "I'm not dead yet." Lisa burst into tears. Helen, caught off guard, reached out awkwardly. "Hey, it's okay." Lisa looked at Daisy, then at Helen. "I'm sorry I haven't been here." Helen wanted to say, "It's not your fault." But the truth stuck in her throat. She squeezed Lisa's hand instead. That night, Helen slept for the first time without nightmares. Daisy curled at her feet, as if standing guard. What Helen didn't know was that the hardest truth was yet to come. Tomorrow would bring the answer Helen had avoided her entire life, and Daisy would be at her side when it did. Don't miss what happens next. Sometimes the greatest betrayal is silence, and the deepest healing comes from a place you never expected. Helen thought she was ready for anything, but nothing could prepare her for what Daisy uncovered next. Helen's energy wavered, but her resolve did not. Days blended into weeks. Lisa visited more often, sometimes with groceries, sometimes just to talk. One afternoon, Helen heard a commotion in the hallway. Lisa arguing with someone on the phone. Snippets filtered in. "She's not your burden. I'm not abandoning her. It's not about the money." Helen's heart sank. She knew that tone. Lisa arguing with her brother Mark, whom Helen hadn't spoken to in years. That night, Daisy scratched at the door, insistent. Helen followed her to the attic stairs. "Really? You want to climb that?" But Daisy wouldn't be swayed. With effort, Helen climbed. In the attic, among dusty boxes, Daisy barked and nosed open a trunk. Inside, letters from Mark, never opened. Old photographs, birthday cards, family recipes. Helen read the letters one by one. Mark had reached out after her diagnosis, but Helen, angry, proud, had ignored them. She'd told herself she was protecting Lisa, but maybe she'd just been protecting herself from disappointment. Tears streamed down her cheeks, silent and bitter. Daisy pressed close, head in Helen's lap. The next morning, Helen called Mark. The phone rang. He answered, cautious. "Mark, it's me." A silence. "Mom." Helen let the tears fall. "I'm sorry. I should have called." Mark's voice broke. "I never stopped waiting." Reunion wasn't instant, but it was real. Mark visited that weekend, hugging Helen as if to make up for lost years. Daisy, triumphant, danced around them both. Helen realized that her stubbornness had cost her more than she cared to admit. But Daisy, sweet, relentless Daisy, had shown her that second chances were possible, even at the edge of things. One final test would come, a trial that would reveal whether Helen had truly learned what mattered. The answer would surprise them all. When you finally face your fears, sometimes the greatest reward isn't survival. It's the chance to love, even in loss. What Helen did next changed her family forever, but not for the reason anyone expected. Helen's health wavered, and the doctors grew solemn. Mark and Lisa rallied, dividing shifts. For the first time in years, the house was alive with voices. Awkward, hopeful, sometimes sharp, but always real. Daisy, gray-muzzled and loyal, never left Helen's side. Even as Helen's strength faded, she felt a strange peace settle in her chest. On a particularly rough night, Helen woke gasping. Lisa was there in seconds, Mark right behind her. Daisy pressed her nose into Helen's palm, anchoring her to the world. Helen whispered, "Don't cry." "Not now." Lisa choked out a laugh, tears streaming. "What are we supposed to do without you, Mom?" Helen looked at her children. "You're not alone. I'm right here. And you're together now because of her." She looked at Daisy. "You saved me, you silly dog. You kept me fighting." The family sat together, holding hands, Daisy curled at their feet. For the first time, Helen felt not like a burden but a mother, a sister, a friend. When the sun rose, Helen felt a lightness. No more fear, just gratitude. Days passed. Helen's illness didn't vanish, but something inside her changed. Forgiveness for herself, for her family, for all the unspoken hurts. Daisy's loyalty had led them all back to each other. Helen painted one last picture, Daisy, Lisa, Mark, and herself. For souls tangled together. She signed her name with a steady hand. Daisy's paw print pressed beside it in paint. Sometimes healing isn't a cure. It's a coming home. And what happened next proved that love, messy, stubborn, and four-legged, never truly leaves us. What do you do when time is running out, but admitting your fear is scarier than anything? At this moment, Helen learns what love is truly capable of, even in the face of the end. The first rays of sunlight barely touched the old carpet when Helen woke to the heavy breathing beside her. Daisy was sleeping by her feet again, and the room smelled faintly of childhood and a vanishing sense of comfort she'd missed so much in recent years. Helen could feel each day slipping through her fingers, time crumbling. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid to be alone. Mark and Lisa now visited almost every day, bickering in the kitchen, reheating soup for each other, always glancing toward their mother's bedroom door, as if afraid to miss something important. One evening, Helen asked Daisy to go outside. Her steps down the hallway were slow, the dog always a step ahead, as if leading her to places she could barely reach anymore. Helen sat on the bench under the apple tree. Daisy sat close, resting her head on Helen's knees. "You understand everything, don't you?" Helen whispered and suddenly broke down, allowing herself real helpless tears for the first time. She clung to Daisy's warm ear as if it was a life preserver. "I'm so scared. I'm afraid of being unnecessary. I'm afraid of leaving and changing nothing." As if in answer, Mark appeared on the path with 2 mugs of tea. He said nothing, just sat down beside her and wrapped an arm around her shoulders, while Daisy pressed herself tighter against Helen's legs. Helen understood. This dog was teaching them all to be together, even when fear and resentment had taken every ounce of strength. But a new blow awaited, one Helen couldn't yet foresee, and everything depended on her response. When you think things can't get any worse, old wounds can tear apart even the strongest bonds. But who will stand by Helen's side when her family fractures all over again? A family finally reunited couldn't withstand a fresh wave of old arguments. Mark discovered documents showing that years ago, their father left part of the inheritance to Helen, on the condition she never sold the family home. Helen had hidden this from the kids, afraid they'd end up with nothing. Lisa was furious. "You thought you knew what we needed? Even now you make all the decisions for us." Exhausted and wounded, Helen snapped, "I was protecting you. My whole life I protected everyone but myself." The house fell painfully silent. Daisy placed herself between Helen and her children, as if protecting Helen from her own family. Mark couldn't take it, he stormed out. Lisa slammed the door, but as she left, she glanced back and felt, for the first time in years, that the fear of losing her mother was far greater than her anger. Helen stayed with Daisy, fiddling with the old collar, remembering how she used to hold little Lisa's hand so long ago. Old wounds reopened, and it seemed even Daisy couldn't restore their lost trust. But the next morning, Helen would find the courage to do what she'd never done before. The whole family would soon realize, sometimes a dog saves more than just a life, it saves hearts. What can change in a single honest night? Helen is ready to confess her deepest secret, but the risk of losing everything is terrifying. Will anyone hear her confession besides Daisy? Helen couldn't sleep that night. Voices of her children echoed in her head. Phrases she'd long meant to say but never could. Daisy lay beside her, placing a paw on her shoulder as if to remind her. Even the most frightening truths are easier to share. Helen pulled out her old diary, the one she used to hide every thought and grievance. At dawn, she invited Lisa for a real heart-to-heart for the first time in years. "I'm sorry," she told her daughter. "I never wanted you to feel like a stranger in this house. I was afraid that if I told you about the inheritance, you'd both just leave." Lisa was silent for a long time. Tears stood in her eyes, but she finally came over and hugged her mother. "I don't care about the house, Mom. I just want you." Helen laughed in relief. Daisy, noticing her smile, hopped onto the bed and buried her nose in the blanket. Helen understood. She was no longer alone. But one more trial awaited, and this time family support would mean more than ever. Even dogs get sick. When Daisy suddenly declines, Helen faces a new terror. What if this time she can't save her rescuer? It started with small things. Daisy grew lethargic, hardly ate, struggled to climb the stairs. Panic-stricken, Helen called the vet. Lisa dropped everything and rushed over. Mark, for the first time in ages, stopped arguing and silently held his mother's hand. At the clinic, the vet looked at the old dog with gentle eyes. "She's very tired, Helen. Her heart is failing, but as long as she's with you, she still has strength." Helen wept openly, not ashamed in front of her kids. Daisy raised her head and licked her tears, just like she had so many years before. "Don't give up just yet, okay?" Helen whispered, as if promising herself to stay strong. That night, the whole family slept in one room, next to Daisy. For the first time in years, Helen wasn't afraid of the dark. The dog, as always, guarded her peace, while she guarded all that mattered most. And just when it seemed miracles didn't exist, something happened that none of them expected. Farewell is always a new beginning. Sometimes even loss is a start. And Helen will realize, the most important thing is being together, no matter what. The day came when the vet visited the house. Everyone knew Daisy's time was drawing to a close, and letting go was all that was left. Helen held Daisy's paw, telling childhood stories, laughing and crying at once. Mark and Lisa hugged each other, realizing it was this dog who had taught them to forgive and love, no matter what. When Daisy closed her eyes, Helen felt the fear finally slip away, replaced by gratitude. The family sat in silence. No one knew what to say. Helen stood, took her brushes and started a new painting. This time there were 3 people, and Daisy running beneath a spring sky. "She'll always be with us," Helen said. "And I'm not afraid anymore." That night, Mark and Lisa stayed over. The house was filled with a rare, precious feeling. Everything was in its place, even if something had changed forever. But most importantly, Helen understood. A real family is always with you, even if its paws no longer tap across the floor.